I don't know, maybe it's been around forever and we're just now calling it the mosh pit, like in the tribal days where they'd like dance around the fire.
Hey, whatever happened to the term slam dance? I actually miss it.
Today, mosh pits are as integral a part of the concert-going experience as $35 t-shirts. A new generation of fans may not even remember when ramming, slamming, and stage diving weren't all standard operating behavior.
We're pretty young, so like, when I first started going to concerts as a teenager, moshing was like the norm.
Every show that I've gone to in my life, there's been a giant pit.
But there was a time before body surfing and slamming became a staple of arena rock, when the pit was still the purview of a punk subculture.
The whole phenomenon, I think, started as a reaction to dances like, you know, the bump and the hustle. Those kind of really formalized things that punks just had no use for.
By the late 70s, you had a reaction to all this stuff going on in pop culture, and that was called punk. And punk happened 77 to 1980.
I am an anti-coaster. I am an anarcho-coaster.
Bands like the Sex Pistols, the Ramones, and the Clash gave 70s rock a much-needed jolt of adrenaline, and a new kind of dancing arose in response to it.
Punk had its own unique dance, and that was the pogo. And the pogo was where you jumped up and down. It was kind of like a fun, frivolous thing.
Hardcore, a faster and even more intense punk variant, was probably inevitable.
You get this escalating level of violence and aggression, not just in the music, but on the dance floor.
The hardcore dance was the slam dance. Hardcore punk was about being dangerous, and the dance reflected that.
The early days of slam dance is almost really epitomized by the Circle Jerks logo. They have that hardcore kid with the strut like this, and I mean, that is it, you know?
When it was starting, people were trying to figure out how to dance to this music. People started, you know, going in a circle. And it was sort of like that was how we figured out how to dance to it.
Some people call it slamming, and some people call it pogoing, and some call it the skank. But I just call it dancing. This one, they just call this more or less a slam. It's just keep going in a circle, keep moving your arms and stuff, and just bouncing off people, pushing them away. Then you'll see people stepping out through the crowd like this, pushing people off them as they bounce into them. Just try not to get out of that circle, because if you do, you get out of beat.
It was much more intense because the dancing was more of an art form. It was like beautiful to watch. There was skanking and like dudes riding around on your shoulders, creepy crawling, where you just like got squatted down real low and just creepy crawled around.
They didn't even go in a circle at CBGB's all that much. A lot of the time it was just people kind of standing in their spot and, like Sick of It All says, demonstrating their style.
These kids were like breakdancing, you know, at the same time they were getting into hardcore. There was like certain individuals that could like really dance, and like no one else could dance like that person.
Some classic hardcore dance styles of that period, real or fake, you decide, were memorably cataloged in a 1995 video by the New York hardcore band Sick of It All.
We came up with different names and was like, look at that guy, he dances like a gorilla. Let's put that in the video and make it different.
The first instance of slam dancing can't be precisely nailed down, but everyone pretty much agrees where the trend started.
Slam dancing originated here in Los Angeles. When I first saw the punk rock movement, I felt that it was very, very important to document it for history's sake.
Penelope Spheeris' seminal 1981 documentary of the LA punk scene, The Decline of Western Civilization, captured some of the earliest images of hardcore pits and spread them across the country.
I saw The Decline of the Western Civilization, that documentary, which blew me away. There was only a few people that even knew about the stage diving and the slamming.
Some people say they remember the day that California-style hardcore behavior finally made it to New York City.
It was Saturday, March 14th, 1981, was when slam dancing was first spotted in New York City. Black Flag played.
That one stands out. I think it was the first time they came to New York, and maybe the first time they came to the East Coast, so all these people came up from D.C. because they were really excited.
The first song that Black Flag launched into, these kids immediately started slamming. Pushing, shoving, smacking, punching even.
And there was all dudes. They were like basically fighting with each other, jumping off the stage onto each other.
Jumping boots first.
Boots first, onto each other, and watching from the balcony being like, wow, something I don't want any part of that. There's nothing punk about that.
The entire gig was just marred with fistfights. It was an absolutely ugly thing.
In the small clubs where it all began, stage diving and slam dancing were a spontaneous and very physical way for bands and their fans to connect.
In the 70s, it was like the altar of the rock star. There was the audience, and then there was the brilliant musician playing his guitar solo.
Punk rock was always all about, when you went and saw a show, you and the band were one, you know, and that's what's so incredible. It's not like, you know, Aerosmith or some rock band who's up there going, look at me, I'm doing my lead.
Hardcore was about the band and the kids are equal. And that's why slam dancing was okay. That's why stage diving was okay, because you were really at one with the band.
And stage diving got really, really popular, and a lot of bands really, really tolerated it. But after a while, it got to be so prevalent and such a pain in the neck to the bands, because people would jump up on stage and bang into guitars and untune them. And any band that really wanted to play well started to get annoyed by these stage divers.
Stage diving and slam dancing made their national TV debut in 1981 when the late comic and CBGB habitué John Belushi and writer Michael O'Donoghue invited the LA punk band Fear to perform on Saturday Night Live.
Belushi got Fear on the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, Fear!
As a matter of fact, I was the first dude to dive off the stage at that show. They cut it off the air, but we kept going in the studio. And that was the first time America ever saw anything like that on national TV.
Nevertheless, slam dancing remained pretty much an underground phenomenon for the next several years.
For about a half a decade, there was a very pure tribal underground of the hardcore movement. And it stayed within itself for a long time.
Then, as hardcore began an inevitable cross-fertilization with the exploding new metal scene, the music was transformed, and so was the pit.
In the mid-'80s, there was what was known as the crossover. And the crossover was when heavy metal kids and non-punk kids joined the scene.
The crossover era of DRI, that was some insane pitting.
They say they were hardcore bands, but if you closed your eyes, it just sounded like a metal band, you know, playing metal riffs.
85, 86 bands, that was, I think, really when Metallica started to kick it into gear. And I mean, they were a direct derivative of hardcore punk. You know, they just went more the metal route.
We probably emulated the same dance, but gave it our own seal of approval.
In the 80s, I think there was probably a lot of the punk guys hated the metal guys, and a lot of the metal guys thought the punk guys were fools, absolutely.
Moshing changed at that point. The hardcore kids were, probably a lot more outcast types than the metal kids, and they had perhaps a bit stronger sense of community. The metal kids were probably more aggressive and not rooted in that sense of community and that philosophy. They were just there to, brutalize people.
As moshing was embraced by growing masses of metalheads, it began to eclipse the previous metal rite of headbanging.
I'm just glad people are done banging their heads.
Yeah, dude, the headbanging thing is kind of like the whole...
Oh yeah, moshing totally replaced headbanging. Oceans of people in the early 80s, like, just simply going, yeah, metal, metal, metal. That's gone, and it's replaced with these kids like, metal, metal, ah, and like bumping into each other.
Before long, thanks to shows like MTV's Headbangers Ball, a whole nation of rowdy young fans got turned on to the new scene.
I first started seeing slam dancing. It was Santa at the Headbangers Ball.
Santa Claus, the man, the myth, a slam dancer.
Do you remember he would be in the pit?
Yeah.
Kinda like scooting around in there?
We had a giant mosh pit in our Indians video in 1987.
No Anthrax videos and stuff, and guys with mullets and jerseys and denim jackets just dancing around in a circle.
Those videos set a standard. When those people came to our shows, they wanted to live that video every time.
I remember there was a video for Exodus, this band called Exodus that had a song called The Toxic Waltz.
Do the Toxic Waltz!
And they just had this ginormous pit.
I saw a Megadeth video for, what was it, Wake Up Dead? The big dudes are crawling around in the cage.
No.
And they had like a 8-guy mosh pit, and they were basically just jogging in a circle, but I thought that was pretty rad.
Pretty soon, mosh consciousness spread beyond metal videos. Long before rappers like Snoop Dogg were spitting rhymes at crowds of body surfers at Lollapalooza shows, hip-hoppers had found common ground with metalheads in a number of iconic music videos.
Slam, yeah, that was
That
dope.
video, that went off. They would go crazy.
That was ill.
Matter of fact, they wanted the black rock and rollers of hip hop to me. The hardcore gutterness, like Mosh Pit, close to the heavy metal. I think I seen it start off really with Onyx, man.
In 1991, Anthrax teamed up with Public Enemy for an early rap metal foray on PE's Bring the Noise.
We did Bring the Noise together, and they would all come out, and we would do the song together, and that's when the whole place would just go nuts. And that's when you would see people in the pit, and you know those dudes are in the pit for the first time ever.
I can remember at Lollapalooza, and I saw like maybe the most wicked pit of my life.